When it was first released, Metal Gear Solid 2 was quite controversial for a very well documented fact. All teasers and demos showed only Snake, who was not the main character of the game, but was the character everyone hoped to see return. At this time I was pretty young, and to be frank, I didn't read reviews or anything journalistic, so I didn't really know that there was even a sequel being made, let alone the fact that it was slated to be an amazing improvement on the landmark original. By the time that I knew about Metal Gear Solid 2, I knew that you played as another character, not Snake. I was partially torn. I love Snake, and growing up, Metal Gear Solid was monumental for my understanding of video games, movies, and how to, air quotes, be a man. Snake was a masculine role model. On the other hand, I've always been a fan of variety and experimentation. Exploring the landscape of video games as someone else usually only came across as a bonus to me. Plus, Raiden has long blonde hair, which I also had at this age, so I felt a bit of a connection, I guess. However, the game is designed to make you not want to play as Raiden. Sometimes in blunt ways, sometimes in quite subtle ways. Part 1. Raiden. When we are introduced to Raiden, he is putting on a kinda lame tough man voice and calling himself Snake.
This is Snake. I'm now inside Strut A of Shell 1.
And by the way, Snake, we're changing your code name for all following communication.
What's wrong with Snake?
Just a precaution. You are now designated Raiden.
He's directly trying to mimic Snake, the guy we just spent between half an hour to a couple of hours playing as, the guy we most likely know very well from the previous installment, and maybe even the older installments. We are given a side-by-side comparison of the two, the macho movie hero video game amalgamation that defined a genre, and the young pretty boy that is directly pretending to be the former. Raiden then makes some goofy comments.
There's a terminal in front of the elevator. A node.
Did you say nerd?
Not nerd. Node.
Oh.
And we can see that he's clearly an unexperienced dweeb.
In VR training.
I've completed 300 missions in VR. I feel like some kind of legendary mercenary.
Okay, we'll skip that part.
As the game progresses, we later meet Snake once more, and the two take it in turns to save each other. And despite the fact that Raiden saves Pliskin, the scene still has the air of Raiden being wowed by Pliskin, who isn't even known to Raiden as being Snake at this point. Later, Pliskin and Stillman are discussing events. This scene is great for showing how Raiden is viewed. He's further in the background, making him smaller than the other two, and he's behind some furniture, making it seem like he's simply watching in, not actively taking part. The two big boys continue their discussion, and Raiden butts in, trying to be heard.
Looks young, but he can do it. But we need more manpower.
What's your name?
Raiden.
That's an odd name.
Throughout the rest of the game, Raiden has absolutely no knowledge of anything that is going on whatsoever, and requires so much explanation for him to proceed. The reason for this is threefold. 1. MGS2 continued to innovate, and this game was packed with new features. 2. Plot reasons. I'll come back to that. 3. It hammers the idea that Raiden may be a little out of his depth. In MGS1, Snake asked a whole bunch of questions, and generally with so much world building and exposition to squeeze into these 10-hour games, it makes sense. But now Snake is in this game giving you absolutely tons of info. He's basically the Master Miller of this game, what with his disguise and tips on the environment. But, again, due to plot reasons, it also feels like he fills in for the Colonel on various occasions. Raiden starts the game with nothing, which lends into the mirror of the predecessor motif, but also makes him seem less adept, seeing as we just played the tanker scene where Snake had a trank gun. Snake also had a radar. Raiden doesn't quite have one, which is another point I'll come back to, but generally Raiden is shown to be less prepared for the task. Raiden's girlfriend is brought in too, and this gives the chance for some soap opera cheese. Snake would flirt with women left and right due to his 007 influences, but here's Raiden having lovers' quarrels. This is a bit of an odd point though, because sometimes it actually shows him to be quite out of touch with a woman's mindset, something that one might expect to be associated with the archetype Snake portrays. But instead, Snake is actually quite understanding of everyone, and Raiden is quite obtuse to everyone. So there we have it. Raiden is an inexperienced pretty boy. But Raiden takes down the final boss with just a sword. Raiden destroys a minimum of 3 advanced Metal Gears in a row, 20 at maximum. Determined by difficulty, I thought 12. Raiden does almost exactly the same thing Snake did on Shadow Moses. Raiden is revealed to actually have one of the most interesting backstories to any video game protagonist ever, and actually has so much more experience than you would ever imagine.
I never thought I'd see you again.
You know me?
You don't remember. Your name, your skills. Everything you know, you learned from me.
He was a child soldier that grew up to enjoy killing enough to be given 2 distinct nicknames, the White Devil and Jack the Ripper. These names have so much depth and texture to them. Raiden is a monstrous killer that is trying to fight that truth by joining a special forces team that I guess he believes will allow him to use his only skills of murder for good. Sure, Raiden is more effeminate and is designed to be more sexualized than Snake was. Sure, Raiden does a cartwheel as a dodge move. Sure, Raiden has a shaky introduction, but he develops to be so much more than the bones of these things. He has such a great journey, exploring a far deeper story than Snake did, and Raiden utilizes so many more interesting game mechanics and themes. He did not deserve to be turned into a joke for MGS3. And he did not deserve to be hacked up and pieced back together as a cyborg in later games. My opinion of Raiden is the same as it's ever been. He's one of the greatest characters in Metal Gear, and would rank very highly for me in memorable game characters. Now, this could be because of the way that he was revealed and changed during the game, or it could also be due to his functionality. Part 2. Big Shell. Before replaying Sons of Liberty, I also replayed MGS1, and was quite surprised by how many things I'd sworn were from MGS1 actually didn't come about until MGS2. Hiding in lockers and holding up enemies were the 2 biggest factors there. My very first experience of both titles, I was simply watching the game, because at that age, the panic of being caught and having the alert phase was too much for me to handle. Especially mixed in with all the mad weaponry that you have to navigate, it was just a bit too much for me. I did, however, always appreciate how revolutionary the gameplay was. The ability to shoot out the lights is great. The ability to shoot out radios is great. The ability to trank someone faster with headshot is great. The ability to cause a distraction with an empty clip is great. The ability to distract with a magazine is great. The ability to hang over ledges is great. The ability to knock someone over with a dive is great. The ability to peek around corners is great. These are great additions that were put into this game. It just made it. Now, when I played, I never needed to shoot the pipes or fire extinguishers to create a distraction, but it's really good how much choice and variety the game gives you. The random items in the scenery all have fantastic physics too. And the use of the fire in the game is also really well developed. These are all features that you might expect in an immersive sim like Deus Ex instead of a blockbuster espionage game. But it really fits the game so well, and it creates so many ways to play this otherwise linear game. I feel like these features become more important on higher difficulties, and I may go back to experiment a bit more at some point. This time around I was playing it on Vita, and I'm really glad that the people that ported it decided to mostly ignore the back touchpad, as that's probably the worst feature the Vita has. Instead let you choose the weapons and items with the touchscreen. That just felt really good. So if you're gonna play it on Vita, it's nice. It's more comfortable than you'd think. Previously, I found getting caught pretty stressful because if you go into another room, the alert continues and enemies will flood in from seemingly nowhere. But I kind of discovered that you can run into the next screen and wait around that doorway and no one will come get you. So getting caught sometimes just felt like a hassle, to be honest. Because Raiden doesn't have access to the maps until he uses a node for each room, I found myself playing in two distinct styles. Firstly, entering and scouting ahead of me and planning a safe route to look around for the node. And then, playing with a bit more confidence after the enemy's patrols become highlighted. I said earlier this can make Raiden seem a little less prepared, but in some ways it makes him more adept. Because you, the player, are relying on what you can see in the environment instead of what's displayed up in the radar. Now, I personally have a bit of an issue with just looking at a tiny compass or at the radar. It's not really getting into the game fully, but, you know, for just a quick experience, I think it's perfectly fine to just do that, and that is how I played this time round. Again, I might go back on a harder difficulty and try not using the radar, because this system also allows you to simply ignore those nodes if you wish, making the game into a different experience. Like I just said, you could just ignore them and, you know, just explore everything with your actual character instead of the radar. I love it in games when they take the chance to strip you of all your abilities and make you earn them back. So many games try this and then sort of fail with it. The recent Red Dead 2 has a scene, well, a couple missions where you're sort of lacking everything and then it's over in 2 missions. I sort of wish it was dragged out a bit more. I think it was in Skyrim 2 that you enter a prison and all you can get is a shiv, and it's just over way too quickly. But when focused on, they can really be good sections, and I really wish that more games would do it. I like trying to think of how to accomplish the same tasks with such a bare minimum after you've already worked up such a powerful arsenal of ideas and abilities. In this case, Raiden is literally stripped down, and to protect his manhood can't even punch. This is really good thematically, stripping him down to expose his true self and or being reborn, as well as mechanically. Now it's just purely sneaking. As with every time this stripping down happens in a game, I wish this section was longer so I could explore the bare bones of the mechanics just a little bit more. Especially since it's closely followed by a massive bloodbath. I'm also a massive fan for fixed camera points, and I think that this game might be one of the last games to utilize them really pretty well. But the addition of the first person shooting is really appreciated, especially to get those headshots. Because I mostly wanted those headshots in the boss fights, you know? Trying to get them tranked down. That's another thing. The game gave you the choice to simply tranquilize your enemies so you didn't have to kill anyone. You could just skip that and not be a murderer, which is lovely. It's nice to have that choice. It's nice to feel like your character has a bit more of a moral compass. On your first playthrough though, you have to kill the end boss, like properly kill him. No tranks. I feel like even in that case, it makes sense. It makes sense for you to go through trying not to hurt all these soldiers that, you know, they're just people that have been drafted in, they're just on a wage, you know. They're not inherently evil people. And it might make sense that you want to trank the smaller bosses as well, because maybe you want to keep them for questioning later. I don't know. I don't know if top secret teams do that. But then when it comes around to the final boss, you just want him dead by that point. So it kind of, for plot reasons, it kind of makes sense as well. I haven't gone back to play it again a second time just yet, but the end boss does have a trank life bar, so I'm guessing that there is the chance to do it completely pacifist on a certain playthrough. Speaking of boss fights, Part 3, Dead Cell. I think that one of Metal Gear Solid's biggest selling points is the variety of boss fights that you'll encounter. I absolutely love confronting a character that's been deemed to be greater than the basic enemy, and I love using the game mechanics in a new way to overcome this challenge. The Sons of Liberty bosses, however, aren't really all that good. I would say that it may be the game's weakest point. None of them are as bad as B-Man or whatever it is going on in Snake either. But there was just something that didn't sit right with every boss in this game. And at least in MGS3, there are some amazing boss fights, so it made up for that B-Man. Fat Man as a concept is pretty weird and seems a little overly comical. He's drinking wine. I don't know why, but that's always felt like the detail that's just pushed him over the edge. He seems to have so many traits piled on top of him, like an obsession with having soft hands, an obsession with making bombs, an obsession with wine. I don't know it, but it just feels like a bit much. And while I didn't realize it for the first time that I played the game, even his name is just a bit much. The base concept though is great. He moves and plants bombs, only stopping occasionally and maybe shooting people. You have to juggle the inventory efficiently to take him down and deal with the bombs. So when you do get round to shooting him, you need to be precise, because only a headshot will be worth your time. So this is a pretty good use of testing how quickly you can go through the inventory to get to the different items, the coolant spray, and for me, my trank gun. But the boss room is just too big. My fight with him took absolutely ages because he moves away so fast. Just going through this massive helipad. His route doesn't seem to be very well telegraphed, so to try trapping him with claymores is a little tedious. And because I was going on a trank run, I didn't want to use a rifle to make him stop, because then that's 3 guns to cycle. That would be the coolant for the bombs, rifle to slow him down, and the trank for the headshot. It was just a little tedious in general, and this is where I stopped playing on my very first attempt at the game all those years ago. I have beaten this game before, so I have been past this character before, but I don't remember ever doing it because all I remember is how boring I found it. Fortune isn't really a boss fight because you just have to wait. But I kinda wish that this room was bigger. Perhaps it's purposely small, so then it can be oppressive and cement the idea that she can avoid bullets, but you can't. But, yeah, I sort of wish that there was more of a chance to do something there. Maybe it was something that was planned and got cut back. The Harrier was just infuriating to my younger self, and it is still a little off for me. I always feel like there's something I'm missing on how to dodge the attacks and retaliate. But seeing as the rockets are the only way to fight back, it just feels really narrow. And because Snake is there, I never feel like I earned that victory. Considering that it's meant to mimic the Hind D fight from MGS1, I would say that MGS1 did this just better, to be honest. Vamp was another character that just ended up having so many ideas thrown onto him that it feels a little off. You can do all kinds of crazy magic, and you're given a very tight space to deal with it. It is a nice reminder of shooting out lights, and it is a good use of that function. In fact, it's one of the better uses of the function. And it did make me feel kind of smart for deciding to shoot them out after Raiden says that he's done something to his shadow. My failure of doing this fight well could very simply be down to my ability at the game. But generally the experience is stressful, and it doesn't make me want to play this section. Getting the headshots on him is really a chore. Coming back to Vamp to snipe him was an absolute joke too. I didn't have enough time to pick up the trank ammo to continue my trank run, and I just generally don't care all that much about EE for this scene to play out with much agency for me. Again, I'm not sure if you would count this as a boss fight, but it just, yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun in any way, really. Perhaps it's not meant to be fun. Maybe it is meant to be stressful. The fight against the Rays is definitely the best fight in the game. And it's kind of a shame that fighting them is so formulaic of dodging fire, shooting a knee, then shooting the cockpit. Who's piloting those guys anyway? I guess it kinda doesn't matter. Whatever. It actually gets easier once they start jumping onto the platform with you. Despite my praise for the camera in this game, I did have several occasions where I took a hit just because I couldn't move the camera in a way that I wanted to. It's a shame that with all the innovations to the gameplay, the way to take down Metal Gear is still with stingers, just like with the Harrier. I do really appreciate the way that the rays just keep coming in, and how the arena becomes an absolute cacophony of sound and explosions. It just keeps going and is really piling on top of you, and you really earn that victory, and thematically fits that the process has really tested Raiden to his physical limit. I remember disliking the arena not logically connecting to anywhere in the game, Big Shell or Arsenal Gear, but with a bit more perspective and understanding of the game, I really love this arena as well. The final boss, Solidus Snake. I kinda don't get why Solidus can't find another way to get nanomachines out of Raiden, seeing as that becomes the final reason he wants to fight you. But whatever, we need to kill the antagonist, and the other antagonist in the game is an abstract concept, so, you know, a sword fight with this guy is good enough. It's always struck me as being a bit odd that the characters suddenly have such an affinity for swordplay. They've both been shown to be experts with guns previously, but just shooting at each other would not hold so much gameplay or symbolism. So, I guess it gets a pass. I've never liked Solidus's suit. It just seems to have a bunch of ridiculous qualities, and the fire tracks he leaves behind always do more damage than any of his swordplay. But generally, this fight plays out a lot like the Rays, a real challenge that you earn the right to overcome. Solidus has more abilities and twice as many swords as you, but you beat him simply because you are better. That's good. I think that's good for a boss fight, to give you the victory because you are better. He's got more abilities, but you're just better than him. I think that's good. This scene would have been so much better if Konami had left the American flags in, which were meant to be in this scene. Part 4. Cuffs. In that boss fight, the American flag was meant to be flying behind Solidus, as he talks about defending Americans from censorship and giving the people the freedom that they are meant to have, to unchain themselves from the unseen organizations. The final image of Solidus was to be him at the feet of George Washington, reaching up the American flag, which Raiden cuts down. This really changes so much about Solidus's character. He was previously the president, and he's still trying to serve his people. Considering the way that Raiden has been manipulated by the very thing that Solidus is trying to fight, it kinda feels like perhaps Solidus is the good guy here. The title of the game is Sons of Liberty, and that implies that it is the most important part of the game. The concept of being free. I absolutely love how all three parties in this game, Solidus, the Patriots, and you, all fall into such a morally grey area. It's not just good guys versus bad guys. It's beyond that. I also really appreciate how the box art of this game reflects the contents of the game. That strong orange color that is quite apparent as you play the game due to it being the color of the big shell. It's just nice to have consistency, which a lot of games don't manage to translate to their cover art. And if it's not the orange copy, then it's this sort of washy blue color. And that again just feels perfect because it's cold and sterile, and it reflects the opening sequence of going through water and seeing the information leak through. So it's odd how either of those colors has got a lot of like depth and translation to the actual gameplay. More games should focus on their box art. I noticed as well that the raids are labelled R0 number E, which reads Rose when it gets to the number 5, and even looked a bit like Rose at number 2. The next set are labelled B0 number F, which reads Boyf on the first one. Maybe I'm reaching to say that that represents boyfriend, i.e. Raiden, but it seems quite clear that the other one should be Rose. I can't actually work out why they would be named Rose, other than maybe this would intimidate Raiden. It's just a detail that I noticed, and because I've not played beyond 12 Rays, I don't know if there's another code name that might illuminate some of this, but yeah. A strong image that I never really thought about on my first play is the handcuffs at the end of the game. Both Snake and Raiden are cuffed, but Snake manages to break free sooner than Raiden. This could be argued to continue to highlight Raiden's impotence in comparison to Snake, but I feel that it mostly reflects the fact that Raiden is still not entirely free. Not free of his harrowing past, not free of the manipulation of the Patriots, and not free of the control of the player, which I think is very important to notice, as although the chain is split, the cuffs are still around Raiden's wrist until the very end. He has only been able to do what the player has made him do. I think that it's also important to note that while Snake has given tons of sage advice and continues to do so beyond this point, it is Solidus that breaks Raiden free. This plays in at around the same time that you and Raiden realize that perhaps Solidus's goals aren't so evil after all, and the cuffs stay on, perhaps representing that despite this recognition, Raiden must still do as the Patriots ask. Part 5. VR. I've done this entire re-review without going too much into the story, and I still want to avoid simply retelling the plot beat by beat, because that's boring, and you really should just experience the story yourself. But, seeing as this is a story-driven game, and a labyrinthian story too, it's worth talking about it in firmer detail. So, the plot is quite clearly meant to mimic the predecessor, and not just to cement the game as being a sequel that feels like it fits in, but for narrative and post-modern reasons. Bearing this in mind, Raiden is us, the player. We come in expecting MGS1 style espionage, and we're ready to play at being Snake. We go through more or less the same beats as Snake did on Shadow Moses. As players, we don't care because it's what we want, more of the same, and enough facts have changed or been altered that it feels like a new game, i.e. the new mechanics, new location, new characters, new graphics, new console, new protagonist. And Raiden doesn't notice because he clearly yearns for the same experience Snake had. The game goes on to mock people that play games and pretend that they've really done the same things as an actual soldier, which feels to me as a statement decrying the glorification of war, even though that this is kind of a war game.
Weapons 80, advanced,
VR, huh?
but realistic in every way.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
That's far more effective than live exercises.
You don't get injured in VR, do you? Every year, a few soldiers die in field exercises.
There's pain sensation in VR and even a sense of reality and urgency. The only difference is it isn't actually happening.
That's the way they want you to think, to remove you from the fear that goes with battle situations. War is a video game. What better way to raise the ultimate soldier?
And the game even says that the experiences have all been a copy of MGS1, saying that it is using the idea of VR to mold soldiers like Snake.
It came as a complete surprise when Ocelot discovered the S3 data from GW. S3 stands for Solid Snake Simulation. It's a development program to artificially reproduce Solid Snake, the perfect warrior. The result is a Foxhound Commando. When Foxhound no longer exists, a simulated Solid Snake shaped by VR regimen. Sound like someone you know, Jack? I'm sorry to see you reduced to one of the Patriots' puppets.
We discover that this has all been orchestrated by a shadowy organization known as the Patriots. They control governments and manipulate the flow of information being fed to the public. After we inject their network with a virus, the structure of the game world starts to collapse, and bits of the code come through the walls. The floors start to resemble the VR extras of the franchise, and the Colonel starts to send you strange messages.
I hear it's amazing when the famous purple stuffed worm in Flapjaw Space with the tuning fork does a raw blink on Harry Carey Rock. I need scissors. 61.
Raiden claims that he's never actually met the Colonel before, and the architecture of everything just becomes impossible.
Perfect performance.
Colonel, I just remembered something.
What?
That I've never met you in person. Not once.
Complete your mission according to the simulation.
Colonel, who are you?
No more questions. We have Rosemary.
What do you mean by that?
Over and out.
Core example being that impossible ladder, the Ray fight arena. We're told that the entire experience has been a simulation for the training program to become Snake. On a quick side note, whilst looking at the music, I noticed that one of the tracks is called The Elevator Up to Hell, which really hammers in the idea that Raiden is being put through a sort of purgatory or a kind of hell or a kind of nightmare to try and form him into someone else. On this playthrough, because I already knew about this, I started to look for signs early on in the game. And it became apparent to me that Raiden might know this fact at the beginning of the game.
Is this according to simulation too?
What are you talking about? Get to Strut C and find him.
He acts like this should be his first real-life experience, but some of the things he says makes it seem like it's a simulation that has boundaries and expectations. When Rose is introduced, he says that she's not meant to be a part of it.
What are you doing here?
Jack, can you hear me?
Rose, you're not supposed to be involved. What's going on?
Jack, I'm a part of this mission.
Colonel, what the hell is going on?
That to me sounds a bit like he knows that it's not real and that she shouldn't be able to be factored in. Of course, he could simply be trying to avoid sharing too much info with her. He also gets a massive electric shock from accessing the node. A fact that Raiden nor anyone else ever comments on, despite such minute details being referenced several times by several people in other cases. Which to me implies that Raiden was expecting it to happen. To me, it feels like it's meant to be Raiden's first VR campaign that isn't a direct copy of a previous skirmish, Shadow Moses or the Tanker. and so he was meant to not be able to predict everything, but still have certain expectations. I think that when he says it's like a nightmare, he's reporting in issues with the simulation.
Understood. But I need to ask you something before I go.
Make it quick.
Who are they? Dead Cell, I mean. They couldn't hit her no matter how hard they tried. And that vampire, too, it's like being in a nightmare you can't wake up from.
Jack, snap out of it.
And you, Rose, I can't believe you're on this mission. I keep thinking I'll wake up.
Raiden, this is real. And that's why you won't wake up.
But nothing seems real.
I've made up my mind to stay with you. Whether this is real or a bad dream, I'll keep watching you till it's over.
Thank you, Rose. And I won't let you be just a dream.
Are you two done? Raiden, you're needed on Strut C.
But later he gets so involved with the simulation that he forgets that none of it's real. I may be wrong, and it's not so important if I'm right or wrong, because the real thing to get hung up on here is the other aspect of the story, the Patriots. Part 6, Patriots.
But you're the president. You have power.
No, I'm just a figurehead.
Huh?
I don't have any control. The real power is in the Patriots' hands.
The Patriots?
The truth behind this country. I'm not surprised you've never heard of them. Very few are aware of their existence, even among those with code word clearance.
Huh?
Politics, the military, the economy, they control it all. They even choose who becomes president. Putting it simply, the Patriots rule this country.
No.
Hard to believe, isn't it? But it's the truth.
We are formless. We are the very discipline and morality that Americans invoke so often.
So the Patriots is a community? A network? Formed in the White House years ago and came from the idea of digitizing human life to preserve our culture. The idea of cultural genes was famously identified by Richard Dawkins as memes. The term has been watered down to mean a joke on the internet now, but these memes are records of our cultural identity.
How can anyone hope to eliminate us? As long as this nation exists, so will we.
Cut the crap! If you're immortal, why would you take away individual freedoms and censor the net?
Jack, don't be silly.
Don't you know that our plans have your interests, not ours, in mind?
What?
Jack, listen carefully, like a good boy.
The mapping of the human genome was completed early this century. As a result, the evolutionary log of the human race lay open to us.
We started with genetic engineering, and in the end, we succeeded in digitizing life itself.
But there are things not covered by genetic information.
What do you mean?
Human memories, ideas, culture, history.
Genes don't contain any record of human history.
Is it something that should not be passed on? Should that information be left at the mercy of nature?
We've always kept records of our lives, through words, pictures, symbols, from tablets to books.
But not all the information was inherited by later generations. A small percentage of the whole was selected and processed, then passed on. Not unlike genes, really.
That's what history is, Jack.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution.
Raiden, you seem to think that our plan is one of censorship.
Are you telling me it's not?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
Create context?
The digital society furthers human flaws and selectively rewards development of convenient half-truths. Just look at the strange juxtapositions of morality around you.
billions spent on new weapons in order to humanely murder other humans.
Rights of criminals are given more respect than the privacy of their victims.
Although there are people suffering in poverty, huge donations are made to protect endangered species. Everyone grows up being told the same thing.
Be nice to other people.
But beat out the competition.
You're special. Believe in yourself and you will succeed.
But it's obvious from the start that only a few can succeed.
You exercise your right to freedom, and this is the result. All rhetoric to avoid conflict and protect each other from hurt. The untested truths, spun by different interests, continue to churn and accumulate in the sandbox of political correctness and value systems.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper.
We're trying to stop that from happening.
It's our responsibility as rulers. Just as in genetics, unnecessary information and memory must be filtered out to stimulate the evolution of the species.
And you think you're qualified to decide what's necessary and not?
Absolutely. Who else could wade through the sea of garbage you people produce, retrieve valuable truths, and even interpret their meaning for later generations?
That's what it means to create context.
I'll decide for myself what to believe and what to pass on.
But is that even your own idea?
Or something Snake told you?
That's the proof of your incompetence right there. You lack the qualifications to exercise free will.
That's not true. I have the right.
So we've been told by the Patriots themselves that they are working on censoring the globe, partially to help focus on cultural ideas that humanity should hold on to, but also as a kind of psychotic authoritarian act to keep the global population in line with the world, or the truths that they have selected. This is a real threat to the concept of freedom, and with that, it is a threat to the values and the individuality of every person. Now, I've always thought that having the plot twist, that the previous plot twist of Solid Snake Simulation turned out to be selection of societal sanity was a little redundant. Everything Raiden went through was indeed a VR session to form him, and by proxy the player, into a copy of Snake. So it seems kind of odd to say that S3 does not represent that. Perhaps it's worded in this way so that the player will question what is reality and what is VR. The first time that I beat this game, and the first time that I watched this game being beat, it felt like classic spy movie nonsense. Just the biggest, most silly conspiracy stuff to make the story seem even more grandiose. But playing the game in 2018, it's amazing how accurate this portrayal of secret governments that even supersedes the White House is. In the past few years, the world has seen many things go out of hand, and felt the loss of their freedom. Many people would say that the American government right now is not in control of its country, and that there is something more shadowy and sinister at play. I'm not saying that there is or there isn't. It's not for me to talk about. I'm not American. American politics only really affect me on the global scale, not on the personal scale. So I can't really weigh in on that. But it's hard to deny that the Patriots here feel very close to the bone. This makes the plot the perfect spy plot for current times, which is why I had to play that clip more or less in its entirety. So, it's been some years since I played this last. In the years between, there's been games rich with story, fantastic graphics, interesting varied gameplay mechanics, and amazing soundtracks. But Sons of Liberty still feels current and impressive on all of those fronts. I think there's a reason why it is the best reviewed game in the franchise critically, and I feel that it will forever be an absolute timeless classic. It is a game of misdirection, politics, robot ninjas, guns, and messages.
Life isn't just about passing on your genes. We can leave behind much more than just DNA. Through speech, music, literature, and movies, what we've seen, heard, felt, anger, joy, and sorrow. These are the things I will pass on. That's what I live for. We need to pass the torch and let our children read our messy and sad history by its light. We have all the magic of the digital age to do that with. The human race will probably come to an end sometime, and new species may rule over this planet. Earth may not be forever, but we still have the responsibility to leave what traces of life we can. Building the future and keeping the past alive are one and the same thing.
Before I let you go, here's a couple extra details that really cemented this as being a really well thought out game. The day that Arsenal gear crashes into New York, the day that the game concludes, the day that Raiden may finally be free, the day that Solidus plans to give freedom to everyone, to remove censorship, is Honesty Day. It's not very widely celebrated, but it is an American holiday in which honesty is encouraged, and the idea is to have honesty in politics, which quite clearly is very important for Solidus's plans. Another detail is that as the game progresses, it turns slowly to night. This is a pretty classic storytelling technique. Not only does it show the natural progression of time, but its pathetic fallacy, representing the deeper descent into the darkness of the enemy's plot. And it also represents the fact that the enemy might slowly be winning. I also really like that you can find claymores behind a sleepy soldier, which to me implies that he's really exhausted from going out and placing the claymores everywhere after you've already been through that area. It's just nice. It's a nice detail to think about. I've been talking for about an hour now, so I think I've said everything that I can say before I over-explain it all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this has been reflective or informative for you. It was really fun to make. I really recommend playing Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. If you've not already played it, it's a key game to play for so many reasons. If you have played it, it's really worth revisiting. Thanks.
A dud!